You're watching Force 13's live streaming service. Force 13 live coverage, or live update, that we're running for the next 2 hours on Tropical Storm Julia, which formed earlier today in the sort of southern Caribbean along the coast of Colombia, after it tracked along the coast of Venezuela for a couple of days, sparking tropical storm warnings, but they've now been discontinued as the storm has moved away and is now headed out over the southwestern Caribbean Sea, that body of water there that separates the storm from between Colombia and the Central American peninsula, Nicaragua and Honduras particularly. Looking ahead towards this storm, where hurricane warnings are in effect for some islands offshore there, some Colombian islands, Providencia and San Andres. You may remember those islands' names from previous storms 2 years ago, where Eta and Iota really caused substantial damage in those areas, and of course towards Nicaragua and Honduras later on. Well, this is another threat, and could be a hurricane threat by the time it makes landfall there late Saturday night into the early hours of Sunday morning. Right now, it's only just getting itself together, and it has been a bit of a struggle for Julia so far. What I can perceive here, at least an elongated centre of circulation, possibly multiple centres of circulation. We'll get the team's thoughts on that in a moment. But in general, it is over warm waters, so it's a no-brainer that this storm is going to intensify. At least that's what we should be predicting, and that is what the National Hurricane Centre are running with in their forecast. They're expecting a Category 1 peak and a landfall there in central Nicaragua, where there is a over 80% chance of tropical storm force winds. My name is Nathan Foy here in the studio once again, and it's nice to be back on the air. It's not been that long since we had the major problems with Hurricane Ian and Orleen. Of course, that was on the heels of Typhoon Noru and Hurricane Fiona. So the hurricanes keep rolling along as we continue to look at satellite imagery mainly on this storm. We do have Recon on the way, and the National Hurricane Centre will update their 5 p.m. advisory, full advisory at the top of the next hour, or by before the end of this hour, and then we'll be able to take a look at what they're saying. So there's going to be quite a bit to talk about. Let's introduce my team. I'm joined by Ethan, David, Marlene and Trin. Hello to all of you.
Hello.
Hi. Well, I guess we will begin with Ethan, because you've already got your own display up there. And I know you're giggling a bit there, because I always go to Ethan first. But I think it's worth it. Let's take a look at what Ian... Oh dear. Ethan is showing us on his screen as soon as I can get to it. It's not the first time I've done that either. Ethan, welcome. What's your thoughts on Julia and its appearance?
Well, you can see there is the center of Julia right now, estimated by the National Hurricane Center. There's that forecast cone. Obviously, this line is a little bit off. Maybe you can see it later on in the forecast cone. But following that forecast cone pretty well, and this seems to be that low-level center that the NHC are hinting at, although there is signs of potentially another center down here, a very disorganized blob of convection. I can go to the full satellite appearance. Let's see if I can get the full disk. It'll be a little bit blurry. It'll take a little bit to load here. And you can just see how unorganized, I guess you could say, that Julia is. It's got a nice convection circle going to it, so it's got its own moisture bubble, I guess is what is the proper term. And of course, with sea upper temperatures of 30 degrees Celsius, low wind shear, and given that the storm is now ending its line of interaction with South America, it's pretty reasonable to assume that intensification will take place. Although, just looking at the 18Z model guidance, Nathan, it's taken a significant downtrend. I don't know if you
Really?
want me to show that at all.
We'll look at
Yeah.
that in just a moment, but I just want to point out there, look at that National Hurricane Center cone overlaid on Ethan's map, and it's not going to have a very long life, but it's moving rather quickly at nearly 20 miles per hour. So the good news with this storm is that it won't have that long to intensify before it strikes Central America.
No, and it is worth noting that this isn't going to be a massive threat like Ada and Iota were. This is going to be nowhere near that. Sure, we're going to be seeing a lot of rainfall from this. We might see some strong winds and some gusty and some strong storm surge, I should say. But this isn't going to be like we're seeing what we saw with Ada and Iota. Sure, the NHC is forecasting right now for rainfall. Looks like maybe isolated 15 inches maximum over portions of this track. But it's not going to be like anything that we were seeing during Ada and Iota, which is certainly some good news. Still going to cause some problems, yes. But that is very important that you don't underestimate this storm, just because that it's not a worst case scenario that you don't underestimate this storm. So take it absolutely seriously and prepare adequately.
Yeah, I am still concerned about the potential for flash flooding and landslides when the storm arrives across Central America, because it looks like its influence will be around for quite some time. It's going to be really interesting to see what happens in the later portion of this storm. As I noted on an earlier storm update, Ethan, we were looking at the storm's energy basically splitting in two across the peninsula there.
Yeah, I remember I talked about it with Tim here, and I'll turn back on the NHC's forecast cone. So you really have this huge blob of energy that is associated with Julia, and as this is going to push off towards the west, something interesting is going to happen, where some of the energy is going to get disrupted by the landmass that is Central America, but some of the energy is going to remain over the water, and as such is
Yeah.
going to remain over portions of the southwestern Caribbean Sea, and could eventually go into the Bay of Campeche and become another storm there. That's medium to long range, so GFS does have something interesting there. And in addition, the southern end could contribute to something in the eastern Pacific in this area. Both could be pretty short-lived. Both will be weak if they do anything, but something could happen from this system, although it is worth noting that that is a bit far out, so anything is pretty uncertain regarding these storms and what it could happen with this storm later on down the line. It's also entirely plausible that absolutely nothing happens, and the energy is just too weak to do anything. So ideally, that'd be the perfect scenario that would happen, though.
You can clearly see the topography there on that map, showing just how it will get more and more difficult for the storm later on, and some really significant mountains over there in Guatemala. I didn't realize how high they are, but still lots of rain possible in those areas. We're live here for 2 hours to discuss this storm as we switch back to some of our views here as well. National Hurricane Center will update at the end of the hour, and we believe that Recon will be in the vicinity in the next hour after the National Hurricane Center's big update at 5 p.m. So let's take a look at all of the current warnings and the track on the National Hurricane Center right now. And feel free to send in your comments and questions live on the air. Start your message with Force 13 all in text in our YouTube chat. So look at this graphic. A hurricane warning is in effect for San Andres, Providencia, and Santa Catalina Islands. Santa Catalina being just off Providencia, so it's sort of marked as one there. Hurricane watch for Nicaragua from Bluefields to the Honduras border, and a tropical storm watch from that same border to Punta Patuca in Honduras. So quite simple summary of all the warnings right now. Tropical storm force winds extend outwards up to 80 miles from the centre, mainly on the northern side, and the minimum central pressure is 1002 millibars based on data from an Air Force Reserve Reconnaissance aircraft. National Hurricane Center's numbers, they are expecting further rainfall accumulations for the Guajira Peninsula, 3 to 6 inches, isolated amounts to 10. San Andres and Providencia, 6 to 12 inches or 300 millimeters. And for portions of Central America, 5 to 10 inches with isolated amounts of 15 which would be nearly 400 millimeters. We're also expecting a storm surge of 2 to 4 feet above normal tide levels along the immediate coast in areas of onshore winds on San Andres, Providencia, and Santa Catalina Islands. Near the coast, the surge will be accompanied by large and damaging waves. Storm surge could raise water levels by as much as 4 to 6 feet above normal tide levels along the immediate coast of Nicaragua in areas of onshore winds. Large and damaging waves will likely accompany the storm surge near the coast. We'll keep checking up on this cone from National Hurricane Center. The 5 p.m. cone will be interesting to see how it's progressing versus the forecast. And as a matter of fact, just a little one, Ethan, here, National Hurricane Center were expecting this storm to be 50 miles per hour by the 8 p.m. advisory on their last update. So, well, I don't know if it will get that high by then, but we'll see. If it doesn't, then that's good news for the forecast.
Personally, I know that models, mainly the ship's guidance, is big on this becoming something big. I believe that it was earlier showing a pretty decent chance of this becoming a major hurricane. I can't see that out of this storm right now, based on its satellite appearance. I mean,
I don't
it's
know.
gonna
I
have to have
can't underestimate this area.
Yeah, you really can't. I mean, given some other storms, Joan comes to mind. But Joan was a lot stronger and a lot better organized than this
By
was.
now, yeah.
But having a look at the model guidance, and this will really shock you here. So this was the 12Z model guidance, really favoring a low to mid Category 1 hurricane. Here's the latest one, Nathan. Look at that.
Oh, wow. Wow. That is a significant drop there. And I just want to butt in with climatological information as well for this area. We did a little study on that earlier on, and as far as I can tell, let's just switch to a different view. Which one do we want? Is this one any good? There we go. There's some good close-up visible imagery of the storm. Climatologically speaking, no storm in this current position was a tropical storm that managed to get to Category 3 when it was hitting Nicaragua. Of course, you have stuff like Beta in 2005, but different track. Along the coast of Colombia, we've never had a tropical storm that got to Category 3 by the time it got to Nicaragua. They were all stronger by this point in its track. And some of those examples, Edith, 1971, that's probably the biggest example, Category 5 at peak, just before it struck Honduras. A tiny storm that one was as well. Debatable. But that one was different in that it was a tiny storm. It's sort of like a Noru, I guess. This one is quite a bit larger. And I would imagine it's much less structurally sound than Edith was by this point. Joan, I think, was already a Category 2 by now, or 1 at least.
I think it might have been a tropical storm. Let me just check the best track. No, it had just become it was a Cat 1 hurricane by this point. But Joan was moving a lot more slower than this was. This is moving at what you said.
Sure,
I know that we were talking before the stream. You clocked it at what, 23 earlier?
About 21.
It's moving at 18 right now, so it is moving a bit quickly. It's not moving at what Ian was whenever it struck Florida, because Ian had a lot more time over water. But storms do have a history of moving quite quickly in this area, so it's going to be interesting to see what the storm does. Personally, right now, I know that the NHC is forecasting. What are they forecasting? 85 miles per hour?
I think it is still, yeah.
I'd probably forecast a little bit lower at 80, to be honest.
Well, we'll see what they come up with in their advisory, which we'll find out in probably around half an hour's time. Let's introduce David. Welcome. Oh dear. For a moment there, you sounded like you were in the middle of a nuclear power facility.
What am I going to do?
It's not the best. But try. Right. Just try. I guess.
Come back. All right. The information contained in the National Hurricane Center's discussion paper is interesting. The speed of Julia, the closest to the coast, and it could intensify further. I was just listening to what Ethan was saying, and also the wind shear, which is a major issue. 15 to 20 knots northwesterly shear, and there was deep convection flaring. I think on the northwest side.
To be honest, northwest looks more bare than anywhere else. Northern quadrants are a little bit light right now, which is curious because that's where the strongest winds are supposed to be.
And lightning developed near the centre of the cyclone over the peninsula. Microwave imagery shows that convective banding has increased somewhat over the adjacent waters.
I just want to show another view of what Ethan was talking about. Another intensity chart here, and look how it's changed from the 12Z guidance to the 18Z. It's been brought down a notch, and that probably, I mean, it looks to me there that the models were assuming that this storm would be up to 40 or 45 knots by now, and because it isn't, they've stepped it down a notch and just brought it in closer. The ship's a big outlier, but it does carry weight, Ethan.
It does. I'm not sure how much weight it would carry, but I know just looking at the RAM plots 24 hours ago, most models had the wind shear over the storm being 5 to 10 knots, if not less. So we're now looking at shear currently right now of around. Am I looking at the?
Well, David just said 15 to 20.
Let me just confirm that I'm actually looking at the right thing. Yeah, I am. Okay. So yeah, right now shear is 15 to 20 knots of shear. So it's double of what the models were expecting it to be. So it's got a lot more shear to deal with, although it's supposed to go down to where it's supposed to be in the next 12 hours. But then it only has really maybe 24 hours to organize prior to landfall. I mean, it might become a strong Cat 1, but I can't see it getting any stronger than that.
Interesting. Marlene, you're also with us. What are your thoughts on Julia today?
I think that it's coming together pretty nicely, but at the same time, that doesn't like that area. But then it looks like it's taking a Bonnie track-ish to at least landfall.
No.
I can't,
really
honestly,
like Bonnie.
I've got to be honest with you, Ethan. I can't even remember Bonnie's track.
Yeah, Bonnie was a storm that I'll show it on my screen for you. So Bonnie was a storm that really hugged Central America, and then it got dragged a little bit to the southwest, and then it crossed over like that into the eastern Pacific. So it was farther south.
How strong was it in the Atlantic?
Got up to best track of 60 miles per hour prior to landfall. But it used up all of this space that tropical cyclones have in this area. Bonnie used up half of it as a PTC, so it took its time.
Now I remember, yeah. And also, Ethan, something I've noticed, and I don't know how much weight it carries. The whole deep water area leading up to those islands, the main area there of very deep oceanic waters, is actually in a cool pool for oceanic heat content, or a low pool, where there isn't that much energy from what I've been seeing on the OHC charts in the last few days.
Right, let me just pull up the ocean heat content myself.
I'll
so that
bring
I can
I'll
see
bring them
this.
up for the for our screen as well, and it's something I've been noticing
Yeah.
for a little while.
Yeah, ocean heat content is not really great in this area, to be honest. So that's gonna make it struggle, I think, a little bit more.
Let's just bring
Yeah, but
this.
there's been little ocean heat content in the East Pack, and look what that's done.
Well, Orlean had a slightly higher area, but I wonder why it's so low in that location.
I'm not entirely sure, but
The rest of the
sea surface
Caribbean is
temperatures.
blazing though.
Sea surface temperatures. I mean, the storm is over 30 degrees Celsius waters right now, but once it gets off these waters in like maybe 6 hours, it's 29 degrees Celsius all the way up, and they drop off a little bit as it gets towards Nicaragua, even further down to 28 a little bit. So sea surface temperatures are decent. They're going to be gradually decreasing, but still favorable enough for this to become a hurricane, though. Either way, but they don't. But the big thing is the low ocean heat content. Those don't extend very far down into the ocean layer. Those are only really, I don't know, a few miles up at the surface. That's it. Once it uses all those hot waters, that's it. It's all it's got. Gotta move.
But it is moving, so I don't think that'll be too much of an issue. There's a
No.
few comments and questions coming in. Keep them coming in. Start your message at Force 13, all in text. We're here for the National Hurricane Center's 5 p.m. update and another hour after that. Let's see if we can take some of these questions now. Landon says, if it does reform in the Atlantic, would it be Julia 2 or Carl?
Hard to say. It all depends on where its center goes. It's quite likely that if that happens, it'll probably be Carl, given that the low level center will probably dissipate over the over Central America. But as
I
of
don't
right now,
know.
really the only model that really shows something else coming out of this system, as far as like a real bona fide tropical storm, is the GFS. Because there's going to be this front that's going to come down from the U.S. plains, and that's going to basically shear off anything in this area.
And we'll show the models in a bit.
And then that front comes in when that low-level center, if there even is one, is supposed to be moving into and developing in the Bay of Campeche, which is going to ruin any chances of anything forming down there due to high wind shear.
So that was Landon, and Random says, could Julia cross over into the Eastern Pacific?
Yes, that would be a more likely candidate for something to develop out of Julia's energy, if you ask me. And of course, as I just said, given that front that's going to be coming on through, it's going to shear off anything. But that front isn't actually going to reach down into the Eastern Pacific, although there is going to be some unfavorable conditions over there as well. High wind shear might be another issue over there as well, given that area, I forget what it's called, but that bay of the Eastern Pacific where the GFS has been showing this something.
I know, I always forget the name of it, but I believe it's the Gulf of Tehuantepec.
Yeah, there's always like that. I don't know what it is, but there's always some. I know there's like some phenomenon that happens there where like there's winds that come out.
Yeah, there's a name for
bay.
that as well. I've also forgotten.
Yeah, and that might inhibit this tropical cyclone potentially forming, but anything's possible given the tropics. I mean,
and when you look at the
all
National
happened with
Hurricane Center cone, about almost half of that cone is into the Eastern Pacific for its remnants.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, could this possibly be another crossover in the same season?
No, because most models do have a close-knit track on this system carving into Central America and not going over the Eastern Pacific. But the only models that really take it over on Levi Cowan's website are two interpolated models. All the global models killed this off over Central America.
Still, significant part of NHC cone over the East Pack, though. Something to maybe look out for. I personally don't think it will, by the way, either. Anit XC says, is it possible for Julia... Oh, the YouTube's just lost that for me. Is it possible for Julia to reform in the Bay of Campeche later on if it tracks north more? We touched on that just then. There is a chance, whether it would still be Julia or whether it's a different part of whatever's left of it and it becomes a new storm altogether. Big question. Would Julia be a tropical storm to landfall or a low-end hurricane? Well, that is the big question for all right now, and it is, at the moment, expected to become a mid-range Category 1 by the time it makes landfall. And is there
If I had to guess... Go ahead.
And is there a chance for rapid intensification?
No, I don't think there is.
Wow. That's a brave thing to say.
I mean, there might be a very small window for some rapid intensification, but it's not going to bring it up to anything major like Category. I mean, it might get up to low end Cat 3 at like a very worst case scenario, but anything beyond that, I can't see, quite frankly. Even beyond Category 1, I can't really see, to be honest. But anything's possible, so bears monitoring.
Also, as we look back at some of this satellite imagery, there's a lot of convection and almost looks like a tropical disturbance of its own already over Nicaragua right now. What is that?
Yeah, I think it's something to do with Julia. Maybe it's just some precursor thunderstorms or something else. I'm not really sure.
I've been noticing that for most of the day, and I'm not sure how long it's... Hasn't that been there the whole time? Because I think a few days ago people were on about this disturbance off Central America and said, oh, it might become something. Do you remember that a few days ago?
No.
Oh. Well, interesting nonetheless, but I imagine that won't last much long. I don't know. I'm just looking at the models again, and it suggests that little disturbance is something of its own. It will just push into Nicaragua and die off by early hours of the morning in the Eastern Pacific. Very weird. But that may well be something that might be inhibiting Julia, as a matter of fact. Latest GFS model, the 12Z run, went with a 989 millibar peak, which would correspond to probably a high-end or tropical storm, maybe a low-end hurricane. So that's still pretty much on point. The previous GFS forecast from 6Z went with a 980 millibar peak. So when the 18Z runs come out, I don't know if we'll... I think we will get to see a little bit of it, hopefully enough of it, emerge hot off the press when the 18Z run comes out in about an hour's time to see what they're running with. Icon usually comes first. They might have already produced it. Let's have a look. No, not yet, but maybe in an hour we'll find out what the Icon think. They are currently predicting a 990 millibar landfall, so also a very similar track and intensity. And Icon, I think, has it just about scraping into the Eastern Pacific off the coast of El Salvador for maybe a couple of hours before dissipating. Alright, let's see if we have some more questions right now. Besides Julia, is there any new areas of interest in the Atlantic? Ah.
No.
Nothing. Sorry to disappoint.
Good.
Yeah, it is good. We really... I can't be bothered seeing any other Atlantic nonsense anytime soon.
There is probably 2 areas of interest around the entire globe right now that I would mark right now.
The potential Eastpac residue of Julia?
That will be one, yes.
Yep. And of course the Western Pacific, which might start up again shortly.
I forgot to note yesterday on our TWO, but I'm not sure if there's something that could still spin up in the South China Sea, but I know that might be a contender for an area of interest.
Yes.
And maybe behind 92W as well. I know that the GFS has been pretty keen on that.
Yeah, I still think it's a little bit outside the 5-day range, but
Yep.
could happen. Let me show you what the GFS was showing at the last run. This was the 12Z run. Let me just move the panel. Here we go. So there's the storm. It initialized at about 1000 millibars. Well, 1004 there, down to 1000. So it followed it quite well there, at least initially. And actually still, I mean, it's still, as far as we know, 1002. And its movement quite quick there, moving through the islands. Goes from 997 to 991 in a 6-hour period there, late Saturday night. And just about moves south of San Andres. Which is curious because National Hurricane Center forecast cone is a bit north of there. It's between San Andres and Providencia. And then it jogs northwards again and into the 980s, 989 there, landfall. Is what happens next that's more interesting. Into the eastern Pacific there, I think. And I think it goes there, and that's a new low pressure system in the Atlantic as far as I'm concerned, Ethan. And to me that would be another named storm. A brief spin up there.
Yeah, and then you can see that front coming through and killing it off, or taking it somewhere,
throwing it back into Mexico and dead. What a mess, though. I mean, look at all that's going on. If nothing else, that is a big rainmaker. All of that event that this is 24-hour rainfall accumulations. You can track what happens here. And you can see all the amount of rain that occurs if that was to take place. That would be quite a lot. We're already expecting up to 15 inches for maybe around this area. Or possibly even parts of... Oh wow, Ethan, the update is already out on Tropical Storm Julia. And sorry if you just lost us there for a minute. They're still sticking with 40 miles an hour and 1002 millibars. That's one of the earliest updates I've ever seen. But there is an upgrade to the warnings. Government of Nicaragua have upgraded the hurricane watch to a hurricane warning from Laguna de Perlas to Predacabezas. A tropical storm warning has been issued north of Predacabezas to the Honduras-Nicaragua border and south of Laguna de Perlas to Bluefields. So a surprise early update from National Hurricane Center, and they now are expecting a 75 mile per hour peak. Wow. So they've notched that down a little bit, but they have issued a hurricane warning, life-threatening flash floods and mudslides possible from heavy rains over Central America through the weekend. So the good news is that the forecast has trended down a little, but we are still looking at major issues potentially from rainfall. And we'll read the National Hurricane Center's discussion in a moment. Let's see if
I already have it.
Yeah, I know. Let's see if we've got any more comments and questions, though. And there actually aren't right now. So let's take a look at this discussion. Julia's low-level center has been exposed for most of the day, and so it has. After the burst of deep convection from this morning was stripped away by northerly shear. Convective cells have been regenerating in the proximity of the center, but much of the activity still lacks organization due to the shear. This morning's Air Force Reserve Reconnaissance mission measured a peak 925 millibar flight level wind of 50 knots, which reduces to an intensity between 35 and 40 knots. Given that the pressure did not drop and the convection has not increased in organization, the intensity remains at 35. And that is 40 miles per hour, of course. Julia has gained some latitude today, so overall it's moving quickly. But overall it's moving quickly towards the west, or at 280 degrees at 16 knots, the south of strong mid-level ridging. The storm has been moving a little faster than was forecast during the past day or so, and global model guidance suggests that the current speed should be maintained for the next 12 to 24 hours. Some deceleration is expected as Julia approaches the coast of Nicaragua, but because the storm has been moving faster than expected, it's now forecast to reach the coast on early Sunday morning. The updated NHC prediction lies very near or along this morning's forecast, but it's just a little faster to account for recent model trends. So that's good news, by the way. A faster storm means less time for strengthening. Shear guidance from ships and the GFS insists that the north-northwesterly shear affecting Julia should abate soon, or at least take on a more easterly component during the next day or so, which should favour more intensification. Ocean waters will also be plenty warm, and upper level divergence over the system may increase as well. The National Hurricane Center intensity forecast most closely follows a blend of the ship's guidance and the HCCA consensus aid, showing Julia reaching hurricane strength by 36 hours, about the time it passes the Colombian islands offshore of Nicaragua. Now, Ethan, even though 65 knots is the peak intensity shown in the forecast, additional strengthening beyond that value is possible before Julia reaches the coast of Nicaragua, so they're still implying a stronger peak. It's now expected to dissipate over Central America by Monday. Various model solutions depict Julia's leftover vorticity moving over the eastern Pacific waters, over the Bay of Campeche, or both after that time, but it's unclear if that will lead to genesis of a new tropical cyclone. We'll continue to monitor model trends and update the forecast as needed, they say. Regardless of new development, the setup is likely to lead to heavy rains over Central America for several days, which we were just looking at earlier, which could cause life-threatening flash floods and mudslides, especially in areas of mountainous terrain. So that's the latest news. They are explicitly running a 75 mile per hour peak, but they think it could get a bit stronger before landfall, and there's the new cone, which has been shortened and has gotten quite a bit thinner. Yeah, so they seem pretty confident what's going to happen here. A quick movement and some slightly good news in intensity there, that it looks like they'll have, you know, even if the hurricane point was on the coast, they probably would have gone with an 80 mile an hour peak, I reckon.
Probably. Yeah, and it looks like that they've also gone with, after that Central America landfall, it looks like that they've also gone with a southward shift, Nathan. Of the Atlantic portion.
I don't think they have, actually. I don't think they have. No, it's quite similar.
No, they definitely have, because the last forecast cone didn't even have the center touching El Salvador. But now look at the latest forecast going over the whole country.
Sure.
Yeah. Here's the latest cone on my screen.
Yeah, I know. I just need to look back at the last cone. Let me look back at the last cone. I'm sure it was still... Hold on, let me just have a look. And where is the cone? I'm trying to find the goddamn cone. Alright. Alright, you're right. Yeah, the end of the track has shifted south a bit there.
Yeah, you can see a more accurate depiction on my screen here, Nathan.
Yeah,
it looks like that it's more shifted westward, actually.
Yeah, it's basically just been pushed westwards due to its faster motion.
Yeah. So there's that shift in that cone. Of course, this isn't really, in the long scale of things, this isn't really going to have impact changes onto who gets the strongest rainfall and who gets the strongest winds. Landfall location looks to be pretty much the same, actually.
Well, if it is moving faster, it would mean slightly less rainfall on the eastern areas.
But it's worth noting that the NHC has actually been pretty dead set on a landfall somewhere in this general area along Nicaragua. So at least that they've got that down to the wire, at least. I think the models do as well.
Let me just see what populated areas might be in that zone. It is very sparsely populated, that area, but it would look to me as though the landfall point would be very close to Prinzapolka, which is right in the middle between Puerto Cabezas and Carawala and Laguna de Perlas. We'll update our bottom graphic in a moment to account for those new hurricane warnings. Just to reiterate, hurricane warnings have now been issued for the coast of Nicaragua ahead of this storm. It is moving faster than first anticipated, so hopefully people are taking note, because it may be getting there sooner than you first thought. They are expecting a landfall. I would say you'll probably get tropical storm force winds early hours of Sunday morning.
Let's
Which
see.
I think was
Let's
the
see
case.
the onset. Do they do the onset of tropical storm force winds? Okay, here we go. So yeah, it looks like that the onset of the earliest reasonable arrival of tropical storm force winds. The earliest reasonable that we can say along the coast of Nicaragua, Saturday, 8 p.m. Eastern. So that's in 28 hours from now. Well, 27 hours from now.
Wow, not
And
long.
the most likely time is probably after that. So that's probably 11 p.m. maybe Saturday. So it's you still have time to prepare, and of course the impacts are going to be start felting in advance of that. So realistically, you probably have about 24 hours to prepare for this system.
Yeah, right. Let me slowly get to update this warning. I have to do it on the air because we just... Well, I have to update the warnings. So I guess Ethan just watch me whilst I do it or something. But to reiterate the updates there...
I'm trying to get the... I've got the actual edge of the cone. I'm just trying to get that center line updated on my end. I can't get it to update for some reason.
If you've just joined us, hurricane warnings have been issued for Nicaragua from Laguna de Perlas, I'm typing it as I speak it, to Puerto Cabezas. A hurricane watch has now been split up as a result from Laguna de Perlas to Bluefields on the south side, and from Puerto Cabezas to the Honduras-Nicaragua border. And a tropical storm warning, which I'll have to make a new little section for here. But they have now put out tropical storm warnings for some of these areas. And I'm just going to get to that in a second.
I can go over those if you want, Nathan.
I've lost my tropical storm warning thing.
Oh.
But there it is. Yeah.
While you find that, I can go over these here. So a tropical storm warning has been issued north of Puerto Cabezas, I think that's how you pronounce it, to the Honduras-Nicaragua border, and south of Laguna de Perlas to Bluefields. And you can see on my screen, I think you have your screen up, Nathan, but those hurricane warnings are outlined in red, and those tropical storm warnings are outlined in blue. I think that northerly light blue, that's a tropical storm watch, which remains in effect for the Honduras from the Nicaragua-Honduras border to Punta Patuca. There we go.
Yeah,
Hopefully I
that's
pronounced all those
the
correctly.
only part that hasn't changed in the latest update. So once again, there's that new cone. Slightly taken aback that they issued their advisory so quickly. It came out at about 32 minutes past, which is just ridiculously early. But we'll take it. If they're so confident with their update, then why not publish it early? And any update on a position update on Recon, Ethan, because they are on their way.
I was rumored that Recon was supposed to be going into this system. Let's see if we can find them on Flight Radar 24. I think I should be able to locate them because I wasn't earlier. I think we can still find them. Let's see.
Oh, you're on
Aha! There they are.
You
There
found
they
them.
are.
Oh, they're making decent progress. That's where I expected them to be at this point.
Yeah, so they were headed for the ABC Islands, but you notice here that their estimated time of arrival is 6:28 p.m., but their scheduled arrival is 11:30. So it does appear that they are going to
They gotta.
that they are going for Lakeland to the ABC Islands, but doing a stopover in Julia to do some recon into that. So we are going to get
Plenty
some
of air
recon that they're gonna
traffic
show.
still over Julia Low. Look.
Yeah, I think Julia's right around here, right?
Yeah, quite a few
Yeah,
planes flying over it.
many airlines. Don't know what they're. I mean, it's only 40 miles per hour, and then I imagine that those winds with that wind field. I think I can pull up the initial wind field here. Look at how tiny that is.
Well, you say that,
Really,
but you get these convective tops, just like that one on the northeastern quadrant that's just blown up, and they can go from 0 to 50,000 feet in 10 minutes, so you shouldn't really fly over storms in case you get hit by one of these convective tops, which will give you severe turbulence.
Yeah, and you also have to remember that these airliners are cruising at like what we can see here for this one. Let's see where he is at. Yeah, at 30,000 feet. So those convective bursts are going to go well beyond that.
Yeah,
Well beyond that.
the big ones can get to 50,000, and most of them get to 40,000, so...
But Recon is on their way. Looks like they just crossed over Cuba,
Yep.
and will be passing west of Jamaica. I don't know if we've had any more taken off. I
There's
think we
supposed to
have
be one more
actually.
coming soon.
Oh,
I think
Just
we
a
have
second here.
actually.
Yep.
you have got a new takeoff?
I believe so. It's from over here in the U.S. Virgin Islands. Yes, I think it
Oh.
is. I might be wrong. I'm just trying to find it here. But we've had AF-306 that has been activated on Tropical Tidbits, and there it is. I don't know what island that is, but that's where it is.
Is that St. Croix? What's the position?
I believe
What's
it is.
Yeah, it's probably St. Croix.
So they're probably, judging by that, they're probably taxiing for takeoff.
Maybe about 2 hours away from the storm, a little bit more. And the current Recon flight that's headed towards the storm right now is probably about 45 minutes to an hour away.
Maybe. I mean, you guys remember that these aren't our modern airliners that we constantly see. These are propeller planes, so they're going to be. I mean, he's moving at 324 knots.
It's
so he
like
is
that
moving
for a
fast.
reason, though. Propeller planes do better in stormy conditions than jet engines.
Yep, that they do.
And they're still pretty fast.
Yeah. So that's the latest on Recon, and I'll keep monitoring it to provide some updates on that.
Keep your comments coming in. Start your message with Force 13 all in text, and we can have a chat here live on the air. Tropical Storm Altony Bronze says, any lightning in Julia right now? Alright, let's bring on the lightning tracker, and let's see what we've got. Let's put it back into the mesoscale mode. And look at that massive burst of convection there. Really big, that one. And 2 bursts actually there, well into the -80s. So once again, if there's any commercial flights, look how quickly those develop out of nothing. So they have to watch very carefully to try and avoid them. It's not the end of the world if you end up in one, but you will get some pretty decent turbulence. Anyways, really blowing up there just northeast of the centre, and a little blob there blowing up over the centre as well. This one, that's right over the centre, that one, so that could be something to look for in the next few hours. We still can't see any lightning though. Let's just turn off that satellite briefly, and well, there's plenty of lightning around. Let's try and get a, I don't know what kind of imagery we could use. We could try and see them at the same, maybe on the normal visible. Yeah, you can see a few of them there blowing up with some convection. So there's quite a bit of lightning over there on the northeastern side in some of the bands. Oh, that's nice. And actually just a few lightning strikes in that big burst here as well near the centre. Yep, you can see 3 or 4 that's happened there. So, interesting. And if we just switch it back to this imagery, once again we can see into the centre of the storm. And you can see exactly where that centre is tracking. You can quite clearly see, and to be honest, I know we were talking earlier, Ethan, about maybe an elongated center or multiple centers, but now it does look like that we have a dominant center here, and it is moving along here. That would actually mean that it's moving west-southwest.
No.
Or
it looks
maybe
like
I
that
just got it wrong.
it's
Maybe it's just going
wobbling.
that way. I don't know. Can't quite gauge it. But the convection is getting closer and closer to the center, so looking interesting in this just over 24 hours before it strikes land, and it's only just formed, so it will be a rather short-lived tropical cyclone. It's going to try and make a go of it to try and get to hurricane status. That's still the expectation, but we are starting to worry a little bit less about its potential maximum intensity. It does look like that we will be in for a Category 1 peak, which is still fairly bad, but nothing like a Category 5. But we are still worried about rainfall amounts in Central America over the next few days from the storm's life and eventual remnants and death as it moves over Central America.
Do we have any questions yet, Nathan?
No, I think the viewers are quite satisfied, but if you do have any questions, do let us know. But just to reiterate that latest information from the National Hurricane Center, it's now visible on our bottom bar, which just went off. But there is the latest cone showing the areas now in the hurricane warning, extending to the eastern coast of Nicaragua. So we are looking at potentially hurricane conditions in those areas late tomorrow night into the early hours of Sunday. It could still move faster than expected. It is currently moving, I think, at 18. Yep, so it says there 18 miles per hour. And so let's not forget the islands, the Colombian islands, before it reaches Nicaragua. Even though it's quite far away from Colombia, it's interesting how they ended up being Colombian possessions. But they are very close to Nicaragua. It's two shapes there, but there's actually three islands involved. Providencia and Santa Catalina, I think it was called, that's just off it. And you've also got San Andres on the southern part. And it looks like both of them will be getting substantial winds there, which could both be up to hurricane strength. And if those...
I see that we've got... Go ahead.
I was just going to say, those of you who might remember, those two islands, Providencia particularly, were pretty harshly affected during Hurricanes Eta and Iota nearly 2 years ago. Yes, Ethan, go ahead.
I see that we have a question, someone asking, I live in Nicaragua. Is it possible the winds might get stronger when it landfalls? So having a look at the wind field charts here, obviously this is using the previous advisory data. It gives us a general idea of what the wind field of Julia could possibly look like. Obviously this blue is tropical storm force wind fields. I'm not sure where the hurricane force ones have gone, but that pink area is 60 miles per hour or stronger, sustained. I believe these are sustained wind fields, and you can just see that it's 60 mile per hour wind field, and probably hurricane force wind field is not very large. But of course, you are going to have this. Yeah, that's the first question. But it's going to be a very tightly packed core, looks like, as it goes into landfall. Of course, the NHC is a little bit more south than this, so obviously you might want to move the point south a little bit.
Well, let's
But once it's
just keep it on that hurricane point there for a moment, and let's try and figure out how large it ought to be on that map. So the 50 knot winds, which is that purplish area, that's extending out 30 nautical miles, 30, 20, 10, 20, and the hurricane winds is 15, 0, 0, 10, so it's about a little bit less than half the size of that purple one, and it's just on the northern side, actually. Yeah, so a small area on the northern side is what they expect for that hurricane wind field. I just wanted to...
I'm gonna try to reset my software here, and hopefully I can... Hopefully it'll actually give me the actual track, I hope.
Oh, right.
Let's see if it will.
Let's see.
No, it hasn't. Of course it hasn't.
No. Yeah,
That's fantastic.
that's about right. Let's just see if we can look at some other comments there. People saying, well, a comment there. So it's not a tropical storm, it's a hurricane? Question mark. That's on the forecast. It is still a tropical storm right now, and still a relatively new one. But it is expected to become a hurricane. And some comments saying about how well we're doing. We always appreciate those. And Angel says in Panama it's raining a lot right now. I don't know if we can look down over that area, but I imagine the center that it's to do with Julia and possibly that other area of not area of interest, but other little disturbance that's over there that we still can't really make head or tail of. It's interesting to see that other thing, and I'm convinced, Ethan, that is playing a part in stopping Julia from really strengthening.
It has to. It's got to. I imagine that it's partly due to the wind shear. But that new convective burst over Julia Center might help it a little bit, although I'd probably wait a little bit to see if that sustains a little bit.
Yep, interesting, but very big bursts of convection there. It's a massive one, that tower that's blown up on the northeastern side, but you still get the feeling that it's sort of just flailing about here, throwing things up without much structure and rhyme or reasoning, as it were. Well, time will tell how this storm will end up. But chances are right now it's still looking favourable for the storm reaching a brief hurricane peak as it approaches landfall in Nicaragua. Models have trended down slightly at the 18Z update, although I imagine, Ethan, when you were looking at chart earlier, it's still waiting for some more models to enter the fray on that graph.
I know that some people have been saying that some other nations might be impacted, such as Jamaica. I think Jamaica is just too far away to receive anything from this storm, luckily. Of course, they might get some rough surf. Of course, portions of Central America, the southern coast of Hispaniola, maybe even southwestern Puerto Rico could get some rough surf from this. But other than that, that's really going to be it from the system for those locations.
Alright, Ethan, I've just got the new Icon model update, and it's still saying something quite similar, a little bit further south, but it has trended slightly stronger from 990 millibars at landfall to 987.
That'd probably be around what the NHC has.
Interesting. We're going to take a short break here. This is Force 13 Live. We'll have more discussion on this storm, Tropical Storm Julia, in the next hour. National Hurricane Center updated it, and it still stays the same wind speed. Recon will hopefully give us a few readings before we finish up at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. Stay tuned. We'll be back with more commentary shortly. Live coverage will continue in a moment. You're watching Force 13's live streaming service. Tropical Storm Julia, we're still monitoring it here, and maybe signs of improvement looking at this satellite imagery. Certainly trying its best with a few big blow-ups in convection. We just took a little bit of a long time to come back there because we were just checking our sources for something else that might have been happening, but it isn't, as far as I can tell. But if that changes, we'll see and we'll let you know, and we'll stop being cryptic. Anyways, this is the view on Tropical Storm Julia right now. Hurricane warnings have been issued for the coast of Nicaragua ahead of this storm, and already hurricane warnings were already in effect in Providencia and San Andres Islands, Colombian possessions off the coast of Nicaragua. It's headed towards the west. The National Hurricane Center think it will reach hurricane status, but it's only got 24 hours to do so before it pretty much starts to make landfall over the Central America, Nicaragua particularly. So something to watch for in that area, of course, and it is coming in fast. There is the latest National Hurricane Center forecast cone, if you've just joined us and haven't seen it yet, from the 5 p.m. advisory from the National Hurricane Center. That's Eastern Time, and it currently has winds of 40 miles per hour and a pressure of 1002 millibars, moving west at 18. My name's Nathan Foy, here in the studio once again for another hour of coverage, and then we'll be finishing up, and then we'll have our tropical weather bulletin later on tonight, and I'm sure we'll have more updates on this storm throughout tomorrow, leading up to that landfall. I'm joined, of course, by my team this hour. We have Ethan, Gizmo, and Marlene. Hello to all of you. Welcome back.
Hi.
Welcome back. And hello, Gizmo.
Oh,
Yeah.
hello.
Well, I guess we'll go to you first on your current thoughts on Julia. How do you reckon it's doing? Better or worse than you expected?
I mean, honestly, it's doing worse than expected. However, I haven't really been up to date on the conditions in that area. I have been looking at the forecast models though. And
Oh dear.
from what I've seen, there are most of them obviously just expect a Category 1 hurricane. The strongest I've seen is the HWRF front,
Uh-oh.
which goes, which is a very big outlier. Because without it, the lowest millibar pressure the models predicted without it is around 985 millibars. However, the HWRF at landfall goes for 957 millibars.
Oh, man.
So obviously an outlier. So currently my thoughts are it will be a danger, as all systems are. However, I don't think it will get as strong as the HWRF is forecasting it.
Well, usually the HMON ends up going hand in hand with the HWRF model. And let's just check what they're saying right now. I think they're going for I think that actually is Category 2, 105 miles per hour. But But let's dissect those two model runs in particular. So first, looking at the HMON model, and I may as well show you my screen here as we take a look at it. So this is the HMON model, which can also overdo things sometimes, and it suggests actually that it is a possibility there. Looking at that, I thought it might have had the storm stronger at the 0Z point, but it's still only 35 knots. So that's quite a stair step for it to do, to get up to 105. Well, actually, that only shows... No, that isn't even showing 105 miles per hour. That's still a Category 1. Okay, never mind then. So that's the Category 1 peak. Let's go to the HWRF. And it's... sounds terrible, its model run. A little bit out of date, which is why it still says 13L. And there's its... Hold on a minute. That's 12Z there, only showing a Category 1 peak, Gizmo. What are you looking at? 18?
The 06Z run.
Oh, 06. Well, at 12Z, it's gone way down to mid-range Category 1, which is good news.
I only have access to the 06 one.
Yeah, some places can take their time updating, but as far as I can tell, I think pretty much all models have downtrended at 12Z, getting on towards 18Z. We've already had, well, they look like they're coming back at the 18Z runs from the Icon, the only one we've managed to see so far, because that's the first. Trending it up again from 990 millibars at landfall to 987 millibars, so obviously the lower pressure meaning a stronger storm usually. And we'll see what the GFS comes up with at their update. But certainly it would appear...
Yeah, I was just looking at the GFS model, and it looked weird when you see Julia dissipate and then two centers of circulation split, one into the Bay of Campeche and one into the Bay of Tehuantepec, and they both turn into tropical cyclones.
Yeah.
There was just I don't know if you've answered this or not already, because obviously I've just joined. But there is I've just seen a question about the chances of Julia becoming an Eta or Iota from this.
No.
I think at this point,
I don't think so.
but earlier on there might have been a possibility, but I think we can safely rule that out now.
Yeah. Normally the National Hurricane Centre's quite accurate enough to where they're not going to predict a hurricane landfall for something that looks like it would be a Category 4 or 5 landfall.
I don't know why they stopped it, but back in the day, National Hurricane Center did wind speed probabilities for what category the storm could reach. But they don't do that anymore, as far as I can see.
Yeah, that'd be a way higher rapid intensification than even Noru did if it was going to go from that to C5 in, 12 hours, 24 hours?
Yeah, it's got 24 hours until landfall, pretty much.
Yeah.
It'd have to already be like significantly organizing, which it isn't. I mean it's organizing, but
I don't
not
know. Maybe
incredibly
it is.
rapidly.
It might surprise us. Those big convective tops, just as we lose that daylight imagery there, Ethan. Maybe a little bit concerning.
Perhaps.
And let's just give you some wind probabilities for some other locations that we have got from the latest advisory. This is for tropical storm force winds. Belize City at 3%, Puerto Barrios at 6%, Guanaja at 8%, Puerto Cabezas at 52%, Bluefields 26%, San Andres 71%, Limon 5%, and Colon 3%. Those are the wind speed probabilities they've given out. I think they could have included a few more places, but never mind.
I would just like to mention that Julia, there was a good thing about Julia, and that the place where it's making landfall, near the I believe northern Nicaragua, northeastern Nicaragua. That area of Nicaragua is quite unpopulated.
It is fairly sparse.
Which is good. Obviously not good for the people there, but it's good it's not as populated as, for example, if it went further north and struck Belize, because Belize has a lot of its population along the coast, along with Mexico. Nicaragua's population is mainly centred to its west, which means less people be affected, which is less chance of the system doing as much damage as it would if it affected a more populated area.
Of course, before then, though, you've got the Colombian islands of San Andres and Providencia. I'm not sure the populations on those locations, but
I can find that out.
they are there. But of course, one major concern is that these are the areas that were decimated during the double trouble that we had in 2020. I don't know what the situation is in those places now after all of that, whether they've recovered partially or fully or where we're up to. But let's just get a couple more questions. Start your message with Force 13 all in text, and it will light up for us, otherwise we might miss it. But we've caught your question there. Paula, how far could Julia's eye be from the San Andres archipelago? Iota didn't make landfall on Providencia 2 years ago, but the island still got hit by it. Also, what could the average wind speed be there? I expect that you will probably see hurricane force gusts and strong tropical storm force winds up to 70, maybe 75 miles per hour, 120 to 130 kilometers per hour sustained winds would be my guess for Providencia. Worst case, it might not be that as bad as that. I doubt it would be worse than that.
Just that population thing.
Finally, Microsoft.
Oh,
Go ahead.
Those Colombian islands have a population of just over 60,000. Which is a lot for 2 islands.
yeah, rather small, yeah. The code is updated on Ethan's screen at long last.
It took only 45 minutes, but it's here. Okay, so having a look at the wind field probabilities, this is really what I was wanting to see regarding this.
That
Is that
hasn't
advisory
updated.
stick?
That one still
Is
hasn't
that
updated.
advisory stick?
For goodness sake.
Never mind, Ethan.
Which advisory?
I had to try at least. I had to try. But at least the track forecast has updated. You can see there's the landfall point. Interesting though, the hurricane warning doesn't cover the entire cone though. Well, I suppose that's because of its core is going to be pretty small.
And stacked more on the north side.
But there is something else that I wanted to look at, and that's the GFS model for rainfall accumulations.
Yes.
In the next, so we go 5 or 7 days.
I usually go with 7. It will show things better further west as well, what they might be in for as far west as Mexico.
So here's rainfall accumulations in the next 7 days. We can probe this, over the western areas. Not that much, but that little amount of rainfall can still result in some big flash flooding issues. Yeah?
Can you just get... So you see those, 2 lakes?
These down here, yeah?
Yeah, what... The land in between them, how much rainfall is that?
8 inches.
That's where Nicaragua's capital is.
Yeah.
Oh. So yeah, maybe 8 inches down there, and the lake itself maybe 9, 10 inches.
Yeah, we've put down I think 10 inches on the forecast for Managua.
But as far as like where the center's going to go, not that much. A lot of the rainfall that the models have been showing is going to be away from the center. It's
Coastal.
going to be in these outer bands. Yeah, a lot of coastal. rainfall events. That doesn't mean that there's not going to be flash flooding issues inland. That just means that a bulk of the rainfall is going to be on the coastal areas. That doesn't mean that inland areas can still get flash flooding issues, landslides, mudslides, significant flash flooding issues. That doesn't mean that's not going to happen. It just means that we're going to be seeing heavy rainfall elsewhere, or the more heavy totals.
A lot of
But
red
still-
areas, though, denoting over 10 inches of rain, 250 millimeters.
That's
turn
10
off-
inches over its capital.
Yeah, I'll turn off the satellite picture here, and you can see here over maybe Panama. I don't know if that's associated with the storm, but maybe some isolated 10 inches over there in Panama and Costa Rica.
That whole area, the west coast there, is lighting up in response to this. So a lot of rainfall there in the next 7 days, and you can see that little trail in the Atlantic, again the Gulf, where the storm ends up. Well, possibly a next storm ends up.
And you can see that
I
little
will say
East Pacific thing as well.
the models I've been looking at, the latest ones I have, do have the system enter into the Gulf of Mexico and does try and reform into a system. And in my opinion, there is like the energy there for it to do that. We haven't really seen much storms in the is it the Bay of Tupac? I forgot what the bay's called.
This bay up here,
Yeah,
it's the Bay of Campeche.
the Bay of Campeche.
that's what
We
they
haven't
call
really
it.
seen much tropical activity there, and in general, the western Gulf of Mexico hasn't seen much in tropical activity. So I do believe there is the energy there for it to try and reorganize.
It's just a question of what'll actually happen. That'll take us a little bit of time and a little bit more modeling, I guess you could say, to determine what's actually going to happen. But of course, we can always go with what we have now in the next 5 days, really. What we are confident about is this is going to make landfall in Nicaragua. Though exactly what intensity we can't say. We can give a rough estimate of a low to mid Category 1 hurricane. That's our best guess right now. But anything beyond that in the Eastern Pacific or any potential reformations is very uncertain.
Checking back on the live view here, visible imagery of towering convective tops on the northeast and south side of the center, which you can still see there. It's still exposed. You can see the center swirling round fairly slowly there because it's a very short time frame, but it is definitely rotating. So just looking at that storm again there, it's the northeastern side probably that's got the strongest winds underneath that big ball of convection, which has really been growing pretty strong in the last few hours. I guess it'll be a big thing to see whether that convection sustains, and if it does, I reckon we could get another 10 miles per hour bumped onto this storm's intensity to get us to 50. Not
Maybe
straight away,
perhaps.
but tonight. We got some more
Although
questions. Oh,
I'd be a little bit cautious to upgrade the winds without recon.
well, yeah, I'm
because
not
I want
saying
to
they
see-
should, but
I want to see what Recon's going to get beforehand, because we have this convective burst that's ongoing and it looks to be organizing, but wind shear is present in the area, and just like that, it could be down to what it was before in 6 hours. So we'll have to wait and see on that.
well, yeah, I'm saying if it sustains for maybe 6 hours, then I would give it 50. Lack of recon data, but if recon they are heading. Are they actually heading in, Ethan? You said that they were moving a different. Your session is timed out,
Yeah,
Ethan.
let me. Yeah, I don't have the pro subscription, so there's Recon
two
right now.
ones over Jamaica right now.
Huh.
No, they're south of Jamaica, actually.
Pretty much.
So there they are. They are supposedly heading into the storm, apparently.
Well, if they are, they need to
Although,
turn now.
we take a little gander over here. Who's that?
There's another one. Yep.
There's our second recon plane heading into the storm. So we have 2 recon flights headed into Julia right now. Of
They're
course,
still both quite far away, though. Probably too far. Well, definitely now too far to get any updates whilst we're still live.
yeah, because I mean it's 5:22 now, and when we were ending the at top of the hour, it was moving over Montego Bay,
Yeah.
and they've gone that far in 20 minutes. I mean, if you really extrapolate it out, that's just too far for us to make it in.
Well, they're not
before,
even going the right way.
Before 6 p.m.
But
Yeah.
there we go. I'm sure we'll have Recon news fed into the National Hurricane Centre's intermediate advisory at 8 p.m. It's just that our stream runs for 2 hours this evening, so we're not going to catch that live. But our tropical weather bulletin will be published around that time as well, so Ethan will have a job if you're still doing the TWB tonight.
Yep, I'll still be on for that.
All right. Tropical Storm Altony Bronze says, how big is Julia right now? We always want to try and measure the thing, but scrambling to get something up here myself. Again, it's very odd, that system that's next to it. The more I look on satellite imagery, the more it is sort of almost becoming a massive, oversized spiral band. But Julia's influence itself probably extends a maximum of around 1,100 kilometers. Its central core region, though, probably about 400 kilometers, so it is fairly large. And we just had another question there. Where is Recon? We just looked at it a moment ago there. And Anietta says, thank you for updating us in Anguilla. And of course, that is an island well to the northeast of these storms right now, so you're not in any trouble anytime soon. We are mainly looking at the southwestern Caribbean ahead of this storm right now. Hurricane warned islands of Providencia and San Andres and Santa Catalina. Colombian territories, you can just about make them out on Ethan's screen now on the left hand side. And hurricane warnings that have also come into effect this hour for parts of Nicaragua. Let's go through the extent of those warnings again here. And so we now have a hurricane warning for those islands, as I mentioned, San Andres, Providencia, and Santa Catalina, and for Nicaragua from Laguna de Perlas to Puerto Cabezas. A hurricane watch for Nicaragua south of Laguna de Perlas to Bluefields, and north of Puerto Cabezas to the Honduras-Nicaragua border. A tropical storm warning for those same areas. And a tropical storm watch for Honduras from the Nicaragua-Honduras border to Punta Patuca, which is the same as it was earlier today. And you're up to date there. They have changed, I think, some of the rainfall estimates, perhaps, yes. So San Andres and Providencia, 6 to 12 inches. I think that's unchanged. So 12 inches, 300 millimeters there possible. Eastern Nicaragua, 5 to 10 inches with isolated amounts to 15, or in other words, nearly 400 millimeters. The rest of Nicaragua, southern Honduras, eastern El Salvador, 4 to 8 inches with isolated amounts to 12, 300 millimeters. Pacific basins of Costa Rica and western Panama, 3 to 6 inches with isolated amounts to 10, 250 millimeters. Northern Honduras, southern Belize, and central Guatemala, 4 to 7 inches with isolated amounts to 12, 300 millimeters. This rainfall may cause life-threatening flash floods and mudslides through this weekend. We are also expecting a storm surge of 2 to 4 feet for San Andres, Providencia, and Santa Catalina Islands, and 4 to 6 feet for Nicaragua in areas of onshore winds. So there could be a little surge there, and along with those strong winds, which we are still expecting to reach hurricane force from this storm, even though it's got a little way to go yet. But it is now on its way. But I would say that the main threat overall for the widest populations is the rainfall. We know how susceptible these areas can be to flooding and landslides, and I think we could be looking at prolonged rainfall for quite a time in some of these locations, particularly near the Pacific coasts. Here's some more imagery of the storm right now, showing a general, I think that might still be slightly north of west movement, but it's hard to tell. Let's see if we can cut back to that visible that we were looking at before. There it is. Can we establish whether... Because when I look at the visible right now, it keeps looking to me as though it's now dipped a little bit south of west in its movement. So I'm not sure what to make of that, but the main point of this view here is to show the really high convective tops that are now blowing up. Quite impressive there. And might that be a sign of strengthening? Well, it'll have to sustain itself for a while. But wind shear is supposed to be going down, so it wouldn't surprise me if it holds on to all of this convection and it continues to wrap around the storm, and we might see it get stronger. We're here for another half hour. If you've got any comments or questions for us whilst we're on the air, start your message with Force 13. We'll also have a tropical weather bulletin tonight, and I don't know whether or not our producer Cesar is going to be running a Spanish update for us tonight as well. I know he did last night. But we'll have you well covered here throughout the next 24 hours up to landfall. Did you want to say something? All right. Let's see what else we can look at right now. Not a huge amount just at the moment, but a reminder.
I'm looking at the sea surface temperatures.
Okay.
And they're fairly stable throughout most of Julia's track. 28 to 29 Celsius sea surface temperatures for pretty much all of its track up to landfall.
Yes.
So that won't be an issue for the system.
That's the thing, it's got high sea surface temperatures, but the oceanic heat content is surprisingly low in this area.
It is actually currently in a small pocket of 30 Celsius sea surface temperatures, which could help it organise better than it currently is.
Yeah, interesting to see how this storm is currently progressing. Let's see if we can look at some other stuff. We'll just throw it back to the cone again just to show you what we're expecting there in terms of track and intensity. Let me load up some other models though to see if there's anything interesting that's popping up in terms of track and intensity guidance. There might be new things coming in, but as far as I can see, no, not really. Once again, let's just cut back here. This is the latest in terms of model consensus, and you can see there that it has gone down a little bit compared to what it was. It just switched back to the 12Z. There it is. So that was the 12Z, and compared with the 18Z, it's gone down a step. So the models have trended a little bit weaker, although, you know what, Ethan, the more I look at this, I don't know if you're, well, I was saying here as we look at these models again, I was just pointing out to Ethan, if he's still there, that most of these are actually interpolations, and
I've just got back to the desk, Nathan.
Oh. Well, I'll say it a third time. I just say that when you look at these here, suggesting that the models have downtrended at 18Z, these are mostly interpolations from the 12Z run, and may actually not be representative of what the models are going to show.
Yeah, absolutely.
So they may not have gone down.
I am just going to, because there was a question, does Julia have a low chance formation in the E-Pack, or will it dissipate after landfall?
Even the National Hurricane Center doesn't know. It is, from their wording earlier, they are open to the suggestion that it could redevelop in the Atlantic or Eastern Pacific. Probably as a new system.
I mean,
but
from what I've seen models have it go into the Western Gulf of Mexico and reform. Models take it into the EPAC and reform, and I've even seen two models that splits Julia into two and
Yeah.
has it try and reform in both
Yeah.
areas. So really, no one knows at this point what it will try and do after landfall.
It would be an extraordinary event if it did reform like like a mirror image, reforming at the same time in the Bay of Campeche and in the Gulf of Tehuantepec. It would be very interesting to watch what happens there, but GFS pretty much had that in the 12Z run. They'd both get different names because they're, especially the Eastern Pacific one, is only half the energy from Julia really, but the Bay of Campeche one is probably half as well actually.
But even still, it would be quite impressive for it to split and form two separate systems.
Well,
That would definitely be a very rare occurrence, but I would assume they would have gotten different names just because they'd be two separate systems.
And just looking at conditions in both the Eastern Pacific and the Gulf of Mexico, the Gulf of Mexico one would have a better chance at surviving, comparable to the Gulf of Mexico. However, the Gulf of Mexico... How do I explain this? The Gulf of Mexico has lower sea surface temperatures, but they last for a lot longer. The Eastern Pacific has higher sea surface temperatures, but for a smaller area than the Gulf of Mexico. If that makes sense.
Gale says, worrying about landslides. How much rain will we get in Antigua, Guatemala? That is a location to the west of the main city of Guatemala, the capital. And I'm just checking there. I would be a little bit hopeful that you wouldn't get a huge amount in that area. At the moment, it is suggesting maybe 2 or 3 inches. But the forecast could change quite quickly and it could be quite a bit more. So I guess you'll just have to keep monitoring things because this forecast could change. But at the moment it is quite favourable for you, around 60 or 70 millimeters at the moment. And I think that's pretty much the comments right now. We continue to look at this visible imagery of the storm. Let's go back to some sandwich imagery if we can. This is what we call the sandwich enhancement. I didn't name it that, by the way. I don't know who did, but this is what it looks like, and showing that it's actually the middle, or the one closest to the center convection bursting there that's blowing up the most, the highest. I don't know what those cloud top temperatures are going to be, but I imagine they are pretty damn cold. Let me just try and check, or at least make an estimate of those. Must be around -80 in those cloud tops. A few hot towers in there as well, so potential signs of strengthening maybe. Well, we'll see. Let's see if there's any lightning in that one near the center. That would be an indication of possible strengthening.
Looks like Recon just about hit the outer edge of Julia.
Oh. How did they manage that so soon? And actually, I can tell you that there is a lot of lightning in those hot towers right now. There is
I
quite
would just like to say,
quite a lot of lightning going on in there. Let me show you on our other viewer here, and you can see those the tiny lightning icons. Don't know how we can ever. I'm sure that we might be able to make those bigger. I don't know how to on here, or maybe I do. Let me have a little look. See if I can make them bigger. Because they're just tiny, aren't they? Oh, there it is. There we go. That's much better. Now we can see them. So look at all of that lightning going on near the center of the storm right now in that big burst of convection. Very large amounts going on in those hot towers. And in that northern one as well. So now that I've figured out I can change the icons, I guess we'll make them a little bit smaller. But we'll leave them on the screen for a while as we keep looking back at these.
just to show how no one knows where it's going to go. The European model has it reforming just south of Louisiana and
Oh god.
impacting Florida around the same place where Ian made landfall before hitting the Carolina. Basically, it does what Ian did but weaker.
That's long range, though.
It is long range. GFS only has at the 12Z run has Julia make landfall, then it has two systems form out of it.
Yep.
One of them makes landfall probably as a weak tropical depression or just as a low pressure system in Mexico. The one in the Gulf of Mexico, however, reforms into a tropical storm, loops around the Bay of Campeche, and then dies off near the Yucatan before reforming near the Yucatan again.
God. That would be dreadful.
These.
Right then, another comment here from Tate. Is the mid-level and low-level center stacked? And if they are, those big towers trying to wrap up an eye wall and then eye, they say. Well, I think we're a bit early on for an eye wall and eye. I just treat this as a big burst of convection near the center right now. But Ethan, the stacking, how do you feel about that?
No clue. I would wait until Recon get in there to say anything about those.
All right.
I have more about these model runs.
And another comment there, wouldn't there be lightning in any major convection? I think that the amount that we're getting in that one near the center of the storm is more than you would expect. And when you look at fully fledged storms with eye walls, those eye walls very rarely produce lightning unless they're really strengthening. I think seeing this much lightning in that convection is a sign of strengthening. Because, I mean, just take that one on the western side, for example, earlier on there, the early one that was blowing up towards the southwest. There's no lightning in that, but these new ones are producing a lot, so I do feel there's a change going on there. And what time do the National Hurricane Center predict a landfall for Julia? I reckon they've got the landfall down for probably around 2 a.m. or just after midnight into Sunday morning. And that is, of course, local time. It is currently 5:42 on the US East Coast, Eastern Daylight Time, as we continue to watch Julia's progress live. Let's cut back to... There's the sandwich, but let's go to the visible again. We are starting to lose light a little bit, so let's just take a look at more of this visible imagery as we can take a look at the storm's convection continuing to bubble over and is on the verge now of concealing that center of circulation. And when that happens fully and for a sustained amount of time, then usually it's an indication that game on, really, where we've got a storm that's starting to strengthen and may start to intensify more quickly. Aidan says, is there any chance that Julia rapidly intensifies?
Yes, there is a small chance. I wouldn't give it probably bigger than, I don't know, 20% maybe.
Do
I know
they
that
have...
ship says
Yeah,
is a lot higher than that, probably
right.
closer to 50 to 60%. But either way, there is that chance of rapid intensification. But personally, I'm not seeing it, Nathan. I don't know about you.
I know the ship's RI forecast the other day was suggesting that this storm would make landfall, well, would get to 95 knots, no problem. It's not going to do that. If it starts rapidly intensifying now, then 24 hours isn't a long time. It would probably only get to, I would say maybe 100 miles an hour would probably be my ceiling for this storm now. But that would be with constant intensification, and I really don't think it's going to explode like other storms.
No.
But there it is anyway. The convection still bubbling over, and pretty deep convection at that. The southern side there is blowing up with more power than that northern one, but they're still churning away. It's fascinating to watch it unfold in real time. These images are, I think, spaced apart by 1 minute in really serious circumstances. During Ian, for instance, they went to 30-second imagery, which blows the mind,
That's
I think.
incredible.
Yeah. Alright, more comments there. Could it make its way back into the Gulf and ramp up? Let's hope
It
not.
could.
There's
Well,
a
yeah.
small chance of that.
Some models show it.
But it might
some
even be a
models
different
don't.
storm by then.
No,
Anything beyond this storm, Central America landfall, is incredibly uncertain right now.
got the 18Z GFS is starting to come out now.
Yes. We'll keep
We'll have a look at what that shows
does
on
it-
the TWB.
It does show it becoming a hurricane.
Well, I mean, that would be expected.
It's only got to 30 hours, so
I'm just checking it now. Hopefully we've got the 36 by now. Oh dear, Ethan, it's going for more strengthening on the GFS 18Z. It is now going for 985 on approach to landfall. That's on the latest GFS model. So GFS uptrending slightly as well as the icon is what we're seeing from the 18Z model runs so far. We haven't got much of it yet, but that's what we're finding. Another comment there, could those blow-ups of convection cause a sudden big drop in pressure but the wind's a bit behind when Recon goes in? What do we think about that? Well, I guess I'll leave it to myself to answer that. Well, I'm not sure. It's always a mystery when Recon go in there, what pressure they might start to find. It's surely got to be decreasing, but I don't really have a good answer for that, to be honest.
I think it might be like maybe 1,000, maybe 990 at the lowest.
Tonight? I would expect to see something like
at least 1,000.
Yeah, I would expect to see something like a 997 probably tonight. So we'll see. Recon will let us know later on. It's going to be after our stream, unfortunately, but we'll have any latest news from the National Hurricane Center in tonight's tropical weather bulletin. National Hurricane Center's next update is at 8 p.m. as well, Eastern Time. At the moment, though, it is 40 miles per hour and a pressure of 1002. Just to reiterate those warnings again for those who have just arrived. Hurricane warning for San Andres, Providencia and Santa Catalina Islands in Colombia, and for Nicaragua from Laguna de Perlas to Puerto Cabezas. A hurricane watch and a tropical storm warning are both in effect for these locations: Nicaragua south of Laguna de Perlas to Bluefields, and from north of Puerto Cabezas to the Honduras-Nicaragua border. A tropical storm warning is currently in effect for well, we went through that, sorry, already. And a tropical storm watch for Honduras from the Nicaragua-Honduras border to Punta Patuca. And that is also shown there
That's another question.
On Ethan's screen. Yeah.
Could it cross into the Gulf and impact that area?
Maybe it's a different storm. I'm getting a little bit worried with some of those suggestions.
Like we've been saying, anything beyond the storms landfall in Central America regarding Eastern Pacific or anywhere up there in points north, very uncertain, and we really can't give a definitive answer right now.
So yeah, just to confirm GFS's peak now, Ethan, at the 18Z model run, 985.
That's about mid Cat 1.
4 millibars lower than the last run, though. So that's GFS and Icon that have trended upwards so far in this model cycle. Only a little bit, not a huge amount, but it's a few miles per hour extra probably. And once again on Ethan's screen you can look at the topography of the area ahead of the storm and how mountainous it will be, and that really is going to split apart all of the storm's energy into two. You can see how it might possibly regenerate into two separate systems on either side of Central America. Something that
I
can't be
imagine
ruled
we've
out.
probably seen a situation like this before.
I don't know.
I mean, come on, we've got to.
Well, it's a definite non-zero chance anyways. That's
Oh, yeah.
about
Another comment here, the GFS shows a 9 millibar drop in pressure 6 hours apart just before landfall. Shows how potentially lucky it doesn't have another 24 hours. That may well be true.
I mean, it's true that the GFS does have it drop 9 millibars in 6 hours.
Let's look at this imagery again. It looks like that northern cell burst has stopped producing lightning. And... or maybe there was just a little lightning outage there. Still a little bit, actually. But in general, there's a lot of lightning being produced in that massive burst that's near the center, and it's still growing enormously. Let's run back to the visible imagery. Well, first there's some infrared, but let's just check out that visible. Just showing once again how the center is getting further and further clouded over. Still not completely, but those two big convective bursts are doing a half a job there in doing it. And a comment.
Just the... Yeah, were you going to answer the comment about Belize?
Yeah, what effect will it have to Belize? So you'll see Belize pop up on the bottom bar every so often. We have the chances for Belmopan, and we have, I think, possibly, I would say maximums of 6 inches over there in Belize. That's 150 millimeters of rain, and a chance of less than 20% chance of tropical storm conditions in Belize anywhere. But right now, we continue to trace this storm as it continues to, in my view, I think it's intensifying a little bit, at least a little. And I reckon, I mean, I'm just guessing, we don't, no one really knows what Recon are going to find there when they enter the storm in the next couple of hours. But I reckon the National Hurricane Centre might go with a 50-mile-an-hour storm when we get to the 8 p.m. advisory. Just my hunch.
Well, it depends on what Recon finds.
There's another question about how fast it's moving. And according to the National Hurricane Centre, it's moving west at 18 miles per hour, and that's at the 5 p.m. update.
And it's still, according to them, ever so slightly north of west. But I'm still not convinced. I think it's moving at least due west and possibly slightly south of west right now. And another comment there, I'm just watching to see if the northern blob gets suppressed by wind shear like they did earlier. Yeah, you see,
How is
I
wind?
well, it's supposed to be dropping. And you can see on the top right hand side of that blob, the shadow it's casting over that other lower cloud shows you how high that's getting. Hard to tell whether shear's having an impact there or not. Maybe it is a little bit. I can't remember which direction it's coming in from. If it's coming in from the west, then it looks like it's being pushed eastwards a little bit still. But I don't know if that's just part of the circulation, like the rotation of the blob as it blows up.
The 18Z GFS sends it into the Eastern Pacific to intensify into a tropical storm.
Oh no. Well, that's probably a better scenario than having a goddamn Atlantic storm, but it would be better if it did completely die off.
Thing is, though, there's no consistency in the models.
Not much.
It's not like you look at all the different models and they send it in all different directions. And even some of the models between their different runs aren't consistent. Well, I'm pretty sure
Welcome to tropical meteorology.
I've never seen the models just not have such consistency to just be sending it in all different directions.
Well, as far as I can see on the GFS so far, I don't know what frame you're on, but certainly at frame at the 69-hour point, it's not reformed into a tropical storm. It's just a remnant low pressure still. But it might. But it definitely goes into the Eastern Pacific on that latest GFS model. Unfortunately, we can't show you that, but it would basically follow the southern end of this National Hurricane Center cone, if the GFS 18Z is to be believed. Another comment there, does daytime and nighttime have any effects on these storms?
Not as far as I know.
There are diurnal patterns that happen in storms. I don't think that well understood, where they can have minimums and maximums, where they can look better and quite often stronger at various points of the day. I'm not too well read up on that, so I can't give you a proper answer, but there is possibly a diurnal effect that sometimes happens to these storms. I don't know if Ethan knows any more on that subject.
I don't, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
No, we're still here.
Anyway,
There was another question.
We are. I mean, it keeps breaking down every so often. I know when we're not streaming, even though my team can still hear me. But I was just saying that our more scientific-minded folks will know more. Yeah, Next question.
At Force 13 has descended into low reconnaissance mode. A center pass around 30 to 40 minutes away, and they're going in from the northwest side.
So,
yeah, they have entered the storm now. Just having a look at it.
So there we go.
Unfortunately, we are ending in 2 minutes.
Yeah,
So
but we'll get a better
nice
idea.
timing, Recon.
We'll get a better idea on the storm's wind field, and sorry about that, and on the actual intensity and winds of this storm right now. You know,
And-
my little prediction is that I think National Hurricane Center will run 5997. Don't take my word for it. They might not find that. It's just a guess. But that's why we have the Recon going in there to take the actual recordings of the observations of the storm. Yeah.
And I think probably the last question for this stream. What is the ocean heat content where Julia is?
It's actually
Very
quite low. I don't know why, but it's in a low gap where you would normally see quite a high area. I don't understand it.
As it moves west, does it increase or?
It probably does, but the once it passes the Colombian Islands, the shelf there, that is sea depth, it's very shallow, so oceanic heat content doesn't really matter beyond there. Yeah.
Because it's a miracle.
Well, if the oceanic heat content was there, then maybe we'd be looking at a stronger storm by now. I don't know, but that's it from us for now. Ethan will have our tropical weather bulletin in 2 or 3 hours. We'll see. And then we will have a lot more coverage on Julia tomorrow as it ramps up towards its landfall. But from us here tonight, it was a pleasure broadcasting to you again, and hopefully it's been useful. And we'll be back with our full coverage, most likely, as this storm nears landfall tomorrow evening. Thanks to my team, and we'll see you then.
Have a good